This is a We Watch Movies special report. I'm Austin.
And I'm Cloud.
And this is the day after the day after.
Literally.
Quite literally. The day after is a 2000. The day after is a 1983 television film directed by Nicholas Meyer, starring Jason Robards, Joe Beth Williams, Steve Guttenberg, John Cullum, John Lithgow, and Amy Madigan. Tell us what happened.
Nukes happened. The United States and Russia nuked each other. And this happened. The viewpoint that we get is the Kansas City area and the surrounding towns and the various families that happen to survive or not survive this nuclear apocalypse.
You got both of those words wrong.
I did.
Nuclear apocalypse.
Yeah, sorry, my tongue is too big for my mouth. But it was tragic. But not tragic enough. Because everybody just would have died. Like they were way too close.
So first off...
Okay, let me put you... That cloud was so big. Like, I know I'm big, but damn. Like, the old guy in the car, still dead. Still dead.
Well, eventually.
No, well, yes, eventually, but like, no. Like, the heat has singed him to dust.
Well, many other people were singed to dust. And, like, skeletons and... It was neat. This is, like, years before the Judgment Day sequence in Terminator 2, and they're doing sort of the same effect where people just sort of get like the wave gets there and then everything but the skeleton disappears and the skeleton is in silhouette and then the skeleton disappears. So yeah. It's more extreme than Sarah Connor's was, because she, like, the skeleton kind of holds on for a while. They're just gone.
Yeah, they're just
dust.
Finished.
But I like the layer of it where it's like, hey, look, skeletons. So if you didn't either see or maybe understand, because it wasn't as clear maybe as I wanted it to be, but I wasn't sure how to write it in that short of form. This is the day after, which premiered on television on ABC 35 years ago yesterday. This is literally the day after the day after, as you said. And it was a really big deal at the time. It was followed by an ABC News ViewPoint special, which we also watched directly after. We'll talk about that a little later, because it's also part of the whole event of the thing. They promoted it like nobody's business all over the place, billboards, and it was on the cover of TV Guide and Time Magazine and Newsweek, and they ran commercials for several months before. They send out these like pamphlet things with talking points to discuss with your family about the dangers of nuclear war, which I'd really like to get a hold of one of just to collect. They sent out a couple of million of those in the mail to various people, and it worked because at the time it had somewhere over or around 100 million people watch it, which was about a 62 share of everyone watching television at that particular time. So well over half of all the people watching television watched it. And it's still one of the like most viewed things that happened at the time. It was the 7th most watched non-sports thing, and it's still really, really high, and it's still the highest television movie for viewership. They had 800 numbers that you could call with counseling standing by if it was too traumatic for you. And various schools the day after today, I guess 35 years ago today, held like counseling sessions. It was a really big deal. And they did kind of push it in such a way on the poster, because it's way too many words and it's also kind of stupid. It says, they told us it would be impossible for us to make this movie. They told us it would be impossible for you to watch it. We hope nothing is impossible.
All right, that's dumb.
The day after.
That's
beyond
dumb.
Imagining.
Like that's some hype
Well, it was hype. I mean, there was a great deal of controversy and difficulty in getting it made because they wanted it to, and Nicholas Meyer in particular wanted it to be as graphic as it could be and still air on television. And they did have a guy speak just immediately before it came on, advising people to, rather than just the ordinary discretionize your viewing, but to go ahead and watch it with your kids and then talk about it, because if war breaks out, then kids gonna die too, so they need to understand. And so it's a really rare case of not think of the children, but like involve the children and sort of go through it as a family. And it did have quite an effect on people. If you talk to people who were kids at the time, they remember it being on, and they remember it being sort of extreme. Although there were 3 other end of the world as a result of nuclear war movies that aired within a year of each other. One of them actually 2 weeks before this on PBS, which are all of which considered to be varying degrees of more extreme than this one was. One of them was made in England, which is partly why, and takes place in England. That one's called something. It's a Bible word.
Bible words.
Bible
you get
words.
to learn them.
I can't remember what it was. But so it was quite the event, and the controversy leading up to it, with people saying that it shouldn't be made, and that it was going to give people the wrong idea, that it was going to emotionalize people, and people arguing the other way. This sort of the Buckley's opinion in the panel after, of that it's gonna screw with people and make them make bad decisions. That was not, he wasn't the only one with that opinion before it came out. So
the fear mongering.
There's not a, I mean, which,
because
in a way,
really, that's what it is. It's like, we're gonna cause people to, and I'm not saying that it's bad in that sense, but it is kind of not the way you want to do it, because like, you want to have people aware, you want people to know, you want people to talk about it, but you don't want to scare them to the point that every decision they make is a panicked decision. And
I would mostly agree with that. I don't lean all the way over to the William Buckley direction, but
I kind of feel like this is, like, watching it today, with it being 2018, it did not impact me the same way that it did others.
Well, no, and it wouldn't, because we're not in the same situation, because this may not have been 1960s communists in our soup kind of time, but there was still a great deal of tension with the Cold War and with the Soviet Union, and it was still, we weren't doing air raid drills in the hallways of schools anymore, but it was still something that was on everyone's mind, at least in way in the back somewhere, and with it coming forward now and then when something would happen that would hit the news. And the proliferation and the trying to stop, and how many weapons do we have and how many do they have, all of that stuff was still very much some of the major political issues. And we don't have the Soviet Union anymore.
Yeah.
And we're not scared of North Korea or Iran particularly, so there's no, I guess some people are, but I'm not, and you're not.
No.
So we're not in the situation where this is likely to actually happen. It was likely to actually happen, maybe, at the time. It was at least conceivable that it was likely to happen. More likely accidentally, which they discuss in the panel, that it probably, somebody would think, like the instruments would read incorrectly, and we would think, or they would think, that an attack was coming in, and they would react so that they could get the shots off before they got blown up, and it would turn out it was just an instrumentation thing. That's the closest we ever came. Or there are 2 or 3 occasions where, on our side or their side, that it actually happened, something like that the instrumentation was wrong. We absolutely thought there was an attack, and the decision had to be made whether to wait a little bit and see if we started getting blown up or not. And in every case, they they did wait and see, and it turned out to be false. In one particularly embarrassing case, they actually had left they had the system set up where they could put in these computer tapes, and it would run and on all of the regular instruments and on the big screens and the consoles and everything, what it duplicate information coming in from the early warning systems and everything, and for training. And one of those got left in the computer one time in like the and they and ended up getting played in like the middle of the night one night, and it looked like an attack was coming in. It was just a training tape that someone forgot to take out, and they got on hotlines, and the decisions were being made, and they turned out to they waited a little bit, and then they realized what had happened and didn't actually fire anything, but it was very close. It was within a few minutes of, we have to decide and whether we're going to turn the keys or not. Because it is turn the keys. It is not push the button, but you hear a lot, even back then, and you hear now, they've got their finger on the button, even in like the Weird Al song Happy Birthday off the first album. He says they got the finger on the button, all they need is a little juice. Like that, it's like the finger on the button thing is this conception everyone has, probably because of cartoons, I guess. But there's no button. Like there's no big red button. It doesn't exist. You have to turn the keys. It's a whole process. So, and we've never gone through the process. There've been other times where we dropped one out of an airplane while we were just carrying it, and it just hit the ground, just destroyed a front yard, but it wasn't armed and it didn't go off. So there's been all kinds of times where we almost blew us or them up in accidental ways, much more often than anyone was very close to actually making the button pushing decision. Except I guess outside of the Cuban Missile Crisis in '62. And that's debatable as to how close it was. But because no one could be sure, and when we've got tens of thousands of weapons sitting here or there, someone might shoot them sometime, or something might happen. And so people were much more afraid than we are at the present time. We still have a fair amount of nuclear weapons. There is no USSR anymore, so they don't have any, but because they don't exist, but there's still plenty scattered around in the world, but it's not the threat that it was. And the thing in the panel, they're like, what do we do? How do we solve this? And it turned out all we had to do was just wait a few years, and it was just like, how do we convince the USSR? It's just like, we'll just wait till 1991. It'll collapse on its own. Like we didn't have to do anything at all.
We just gotta sit, be patient, and they will dismantle themselves.
They will dismantle themselves. And
then they'll have some AC/DC.
Well, yeah, like right away.
Yeah.
Right there. It's free. It wasn't just AC/DC, to be fair. It was basically the whole lineup of the 91 Monsters of Rock concert. Metallica was there. Various bands were there. But one of the big ones that was asked for by name was AC/DC. And it's one of the largest attendance. Maybe it's still the largest. I'm not sure now, because there have been some muddy kinds of things with festivals and stuff. But it's over 1 million people. It's something like 1.7 million people or something. I think it's supposed to have been that showed up for it. It's a crazy amount of people at a concert. I do like the build up to the actual war, such as the war actually is. It's not much of a war. Which actually is another thing. You said something about how nukes get fired.
They get fired,
and that's the way that they wanted it to be, which actually cost them support from the government. So there was a bunch of like launch footage and things that weren't yet in the declassified information that you could just use publicly, that they weren't allowed to use because they wouldn't, like the military and the government were like, but we want you to make it clear that they shot first. And they were like, but we don't want to make it clear who shot first. That's not the point. The point is that if anybody shoots, everyone dies. So it's not a political, it's not an us against the Soviets thing. And so they wouldn't do it. They were steadfast about it. And so they said, well, you can't use any of our footage then. So they did cost them something. But that is something that's very important about it, that it's not It's not a political statement at all.
No.
It's just this is real dumb what we're doing, and and not we or they, we just like people on Earth are being real dumb, and we're gonna like bad stuff could happen if we don't get less dumb. And the doctor character actually has he has it in a line where he says stupidity has a way of getting its way or something.
Yeah.
And so they're very they lean very heavily on the, can we just not be dumb? Let's do that.
Well, just trying to look at the movie from a movie perspective.
Uh-huh.
Whenever we're introduced to all these characters, the guy with the curly hair.
Which one?
Exactly.
Well, one of them is
exactly.
One of them is Steve Guttenberg. He's the boyfriend, I think. Or maybe he's the college one. I can't remember.
Exactly.
I don't remember.
See, that's the problem.
There's two of them. They're
right, so,
very confusable. One of them is like the going to med school one.
Yeah, that's
who goes to med school where
pre-med.
The father teaches, but it's not the father of the daughter who's getting married to the other curly hair guy. So
one second. Okay, so we got old man doctor. We got now. Did the dude say he was Japanese or what? Because like
he never says.
No,
say.
Because one second, like there was the scene where the curly-haired guy is in the line with all the other dudes, and they make the comment. It's like, yeah, this is just like waiting in line at the army or whatever, and they're all having their physicals taken. And then we see the dude, and he says like, "What's your name?" And he gives him a look, and then he says something about being Japanese. And I'm like, well, one, you look like you would be. This dude does not. Like he is blonde with curly hair. Those look like blue eyes. Like, don't try to BS me. But I digress. You get him, the secondary doctor. You have the nurse. Then you have the farmer, his family, including the wife, the two small children, the daughter that's going to get married, the fiance to be husband with the motorcycle. Motorcycle's important. And then you get the other curly-haired kid who's the pre-med kid. And I'm trying to remember who else. There's the black guy who's with the Air Force.
Yeah.
And then you have the homeless man, who I think his name was Cody.
Well, he says that.
Like my friend here, his name's Cody, but he can't talk.
I think he named him Cody because we never saw him say anything. So I don't know how he knows what his name is unless he's wearing dog tags or something.
Homeless man, his name is Cody. He's cool. But I don't remember any characters past that point.
Well, there's a lot of people that we sort of meet for a moment here or there.
There's the people from the school, like the college people, and then the one dude who's
like the
actually
friends,
and then the guy who's actually famous, who's on the radio or trying to run the radio.
Oh yeah,
him.
Which it's really interesting the time that this is in because that's John Lithgow. Who, if you watch it now, you think, oh, he's like a famous guy. And Steve Guttenberg is famous also, although it's hard to recognize that it's him because he's so young.
Yeah, they both are.
But they both are, yeah. But at the time, in order to have them let them make it, because they Nicholas Meyer kind of wanted it to not. He didn't want people to be distracted by having a bunch of stars in it. And so he wanted people that people didn't really know. But ABC thought, well, but if we're going to show this in Europe, then they're going to, like, that doesn't work over, like, we needed somebody who's at least kind of recognizable. And that was Jason Robards, who is the doctor, I think. Yes, the doctor. And so he was thought of at the time as the most well-known actor in the thing, but I don't know who he is.
Yeah, I don't know.
I didn't recognize him. I'm like, hey, look, John Lithgow, and I think Steve Guttenberg, but it's and even Bibi Besh, who's the farm wife, is but I don't know who Jason Robards is at all. But he was the famous one at the time. He's running the radio. He gets it working. They got it working between buildings, at least.
Yeah, at least between the buildings.
I really was kind of unsure how they did that because nobody is leaving the buildings yet because of the radiation. And so I didn't know how they got a radio over there to them.
Well, I wonder if, because they could just already have had a radio.
Guess.
And then, because
well, no, not one of those, because they had to dig the ones out of the museum and stuff. So there's not just one sitting around over in the hospital area. I wouldn't think.
Well, no, I would say that the hospital would just have like a radio in general that can receive, and then the one that they're using is like a big boy radio to get to like other states and talk to like government facilities. Like, hey, we need help.
Yeah, which
can you hear me over?
Which doesn't happen. They do eventually. I think it's been about a week, maybe. I'm not really sure about the passage of time past a certain point, but at some point there's a broadcast by the president, and he tells them some stuff, and that's on the radio. But otherwise, they never get through to anyone. And they actually have a two-way radio. At least it's not like, this is the only communication we have. It's a one-way radio. It only receives, like they had in Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
They're trying to talk to people at least.
Now, the reason I bring up these characters is because I only directly have two real problems with this movie. One is the guy who's going to be married with the motorcycle, and then the curly-haired dude who's the pre-med student are so similar visually that I could not tell the difference between them in the scenes until they actually said something, because I thought they were the same person.
It's hard to tell.
He's on a motorcycle.
He leaves on the motorcycle and he goes someplace, I thought, to the college town.
And then next thing I know, he's hitchhiking. And I'm like,
it's like, wait, what happened to the motorcycle? And then he shows up on the motorcycle later, and it's like, oh, wait, it's not the same guy.
Like, oh, this is supposed to be a different guy. Like that, I have a problem with.
Then especially once everything is blown up, and they're kind of wandering from place to place and they're all dirty and stuff, then it's especially hard to tell because they don't speak sometimes.
Yeah.
And so you just see a guy with curly hair wandering around, and then I wonder who it is.
At that point, because we see the dude on the motorcycle get vaporized.
Yeah. So after that, then you know, but then which one was he?
Yeah.
So it takes a while to figure that out, but then it turns out it's the med student guy who's not the boyfriend guy.
And my second problem is when the farmer dad gets shot.
Yeah,
because
that was really bogus.
Well, yeah, it's not only is it bogus, like one, okay, this is the 80s, but regardless of being in the 80s, he's like a cowboy kind of guy. He's a farmer. He's out there. That's all he's known. That's what he does. And you're going to tell me that he has his shotgun not readily available? Like, I don't know. Now,
he doesn't get shot until way after that.
Now, one second. Let me finish. I don't know of anybody who rides a horse and carries a rifle, preferably. I don't know many who carry a shotgun like that. I know people who carry rifles, but they always have it right there. Like, they have like a special thing they have it slid in so they can be riding their horse and they can just pull it up at any time. And so that's the
way you used to have it. I don't know. These are modern horses that probably weren't. Like, I don't even know where they got the horses. Yeah, because like
how are these horses alive?
Their horses were dead.
Yeah,
and then later there are some other horses, and they have a horse buggy, and so I don't know if there were just horses farther away, or these horses were inside, or what. Because the horses die, like the dog doesn't die right away.
No,
it dies over several days because it's just out there in the radiation.
And then some random man who goes into the house.
Some random man.
We don't get a scene.
Know who he is.
Yeah, we don't get a scene because like when the guy shows up,
they
the first
find
one
him dead.
Like he shows up and they hear him
around. Yeah,
and then you're gonna tell me that this guy showed up and they didn't hear him like fall to the ground and die, or at least fall to the ground.
Maybe he
then die?
Crawled his way in or something. Maybe he fell down earlier. I don't know. We don't know who he is.
But it's when he gets shot because he gets off his horse. He walks around the horse. Taz is back to these people the whole time, and the guy that shoots him is still sitting down.
He sees the guy walk away. We see the guy walk away.
The dude that shoots him is still sitting down, not doing anything. The guy gets his shotgun out of the holster, turns around, and then as he's walking to him, the guy gets up, walks around the fire, and stands beside him and shoots him.
Yeah.
There is no way you could not have seen that.
The mechanics of it are weird, yeah.
Like, the dude is still lit by that fire the entire time, and you can see the rifle in his hand.
Well, and I was wondering where he was, because, like, he gets up and then we don't really see him. He's off to the side of the screen, but he couldn't have gone very far, and so I wonder why he's not looking around, and you can kind of feel he's gonna get shot before it happens. And it's just not for any reason.
No. It doesn't apply anything to the movie except make me angry, because this is all something that could have been prevented if he would have just paid attention.
Well, it's also really out of place, because one of the things that I did like about it, there were some other scenes that were cut out.
Like, people weren't killing people.
Where people rioted and people were stealing food and stuff. We get the scene at the grocery store before the bombs fall.
Yeah.
And everybody's buying things. Like, they're still in a panic, but they're trying to buy things. And so it's not really like looting or anything. I guess the guy in the basement tells the doctor that he's heard that they're like shooting people who loot or something. And so there must be
firing squads.
There must be some people who do it, but we don't really see it, and it's not a point that is made. And it's most of the time when you have something disastrous happens, that's a significant thing that you see. People go crazy and they steal things and they bust stuff up and there's cars on fire in the street. And you don't really have that. Mostly it's just everybody's trying to not die just from the environment, not from each other.
Well,
and then that's the only time there's something like that, really.
Yeah.
And so it's weird.
Well, we do get some, I guess you'd say, urban shooting. Whenever the Air Force,
I guess so. Yeah,
there's
hear
a
it in
little
the
bit
distance.
of that.
We don't see it,
and then he books it.
Yeah,
but when they talk about the firing squads, like, that's how they bring it up. Like, there's a firing squad that's just gathering these people up and then just executing them.
Yeah,
and then when we see the firing squad towards the end of the movie, and it's not just some dudes. Like, this looks like it's either National Guard, it's some form of like government-controlled military operation,
or people who busted into the armory or something,
and are all wearing,
and took the uniforms.
Yeah, and because, like, we know at this point that they are transporting food to the different settlement areas. Because we even get a scene where they pass out all the food, and they're like, "Hey, lady, if you don't believe us, you could just come in here and take a look." And obviously, you wouldn't want that if you have food for another area. You just go, like, all right, bring some by so and so. And then you move on. You don't cause a commotion. You just move.
I guess
quickly.
there is that riot that people do riot and they do steal the food. They don't really kill anybody though. No. Although there is this like one shot of what seems to be someone getting trampled that they cut back to several times during the food riot.
But like, those are the only two issues I directly have with it. Like, okay, the explosions and their direct effects on those areas are inaccurate, but
they say that at the end.
Yeah, like, whenever they get to the panel and it's just like, oh yeah, like, this is...
Well, no, not then. I mean, like, the text at the end says instead of exaggerating the way movies normally do, we reverse exaggerated so that we could actually tell a story, because it would actually be much worse than this.
But, like, because of the whole, like, we ourselves don't know how bad it actually would have been, I'll give them some credit, and I won't hate on it so much for the inaccuracies. They admitted to it. It did help tell the story. I thought the story was okay. Like, even when the old man doctor, like, broke down because he lost his entire family, and his house is technically a crater, even though the chimney thing is still there.
Yeah.
And there's just, like, these people huddled into that in that crater, and he's like, "Get out of my house." Like, even that breakdown, like, I was okay with that. Well, I think this was good.
That's one of the there's I don't know, 4 or 5 moments where people sort of Michael Crichton it, where just like everything kind of stops so that someone can speechify for a moment about the message we're supposed to be getting. And that one is a really subtle one, because it's not done, nobody's talking, and it's the last thing that we see, but it's this like entire like encapsulation of the whole idea of the movie in this one silent moment, because he says, "Get out of my house," which you could take to mean like any variety of like ownership of things, countries and land, and this is our oil and whatever. That, and then they look around and they realize that's what got them into this, and then they just kind of like hug, and then that's the last thing we see, and we fade out on them. And so that's the whole distillation of, this is dumb that we're fighting, look what it'll get us, can't we just get along? And I didn't actually even realize it until today. I'm glad we didn't record last night, because that was something that it took me thinking about this thing all day today to be like, oh wait, it just like hit me at one point. This is the whole thing right here, in a way that just slipped past me. And it's much better than when people just stop and talk to each other for a moment about the messages. I mean, it's not like we meet a guy in the woods and he suddenly starts giving us a sermon about how climate change and bird hunting and whatever is like the reason. And it's nothing that bad, but it's enough that the tone of voice is different. The way it's written sounds different. It's just, it gets a little ham-handy sometimes with the like, let's make sure you learn something here for a minute, even though the whole thing is supposed to make you learn something. I was thinking, is the sound of a Geiger counter inherently creepy, or is it only creepy because we understand what it represents?
Well, I would say I've watched a lot of Godzilla movies. There are Geiger counters in like every single Godzilla movie.
Yeah.
So I'm used to the sound. And I would say a Geiger counter that is operating normally, and there's like low, because there's always radiation, you can't get away from it, it's everywhere. But when it's really, really low, and you just hear the standard little crackling sound it makes, it doesn't bother me, whatever. It's not until it starts like speeding up when it's like, oh, there's radiation here. I won't say the sound so much bothers me, it's like the awareness what the sound represents is what bothers me.
So it's not inherently, it's because we understand.
Yeah. Yeah. Because like I said, like when it just plays on its normal, like nothing bad's happening, not even a problem. Not even a problem. It's like Wednesday at noon when the tornado sirens go off. No problem. When it's not Wednesday at noon and you hear the sirens go off, maybe I should seek shelter.
Like I agree with that to a certain point. Just the sound by itself, still, even when I know it's just the test one, still gives me like a little bit of the same prickle that a real event siren does, but not to the same, nowhere near the same extent. So I think there is some inherent effect in that, maybe, but not like when it's for real. Now, you said there were only two things. There's actually a third thing that did bother both of us, and it's unnecessariness. The doctor and I think it's the nurse or the other doctor are talking, and then they finish talking, and just as they finish talking, outside the room in the next room, a patient raises up and screams. And nothing. Yeah. That was actually cut out of the original broadcast, because there were all these little things that they thought cumulatively made it even more traumatic than it was, and they couldn't allow it. That was one of the things that was cut out, and I think I would have rather that it was cut out.
Yeah, because it's not scary.
It's not scary.
It's not scary.
Really
it has no impact.
It actually does damage to the moment before it. Yeah. Because it's just like, well, wait, I was still thinking about that, and then which maybe is the point. I don't know. But
this is a serious moment. There's like a lesson that's trying to be taught here. You know, we got this character development. We're trying to learn stuff, and then scream.
Yeah, and I think it's because I didn't know there was a person there. Like, if I knew there was a patient there, if they had been like moaning for a while, or we at least knew someone was there, and it didn't come as such of a like, wait, what's this person we don't care about suddenly screaming and interrupting the scene?
Yeah.
Or if it was someone we knew, maybe if it was one of the characters that we knew, which the way that people get worse and worse in their radiation sickness over the course of the movie, and they keep changing their makeup, and
it looks
like
really
all
good.
of that's really good. And
okay, so there are two things that I want to talk about around the hospital. Now, this one's just a really quick snippet. There's a lady who's pregnant, and she's like 2 weeks overdue. And you have the old man doctor, and he's talking to her and everything, and she's upset because like the world is ending and
Yeah.
who wants to be born into this, and he's trying to talk about hope to like raise her spirits, but she kind of has these realistic kind of expectations, and then he's just like, okay, you're right. And then she's like, but you're supposed to inspire me.
Yeah.
And he's just like, nah, I'm done with that shit.
Yeah.
I kind of like that because there's a point where it's like, I'm doing everything I can. I'm killing myself to help all of these people, and you're complaining. Let's just try and get this kid out of you. Okay. And then you know, he's gone at this point, but she's starting to give birth to the child. And then you see all these other people, like, because there's no room. You're not going to get any privacy.
In.
And then you have like all these people with these terror, just these horrid looks on their face because you can hear her like going through the pain of the childbirth, and it's just like, listen, it's not like they're sawing her legs off.
No, it'll be okay.
Yeah, it's this is only for a little bit.
Probably it could not be okay.
Yeah, but making the face like, this is like, stop it. And the fact is, those were all women making that face.
Mostly, yeah. Well, maybe it's like
no, like because like we get focused on like these people on the wall directly behind her, and that all of them, those were women.
Yeah, no, but I mean, like maybe it's like sympathetic discomfort looks, like they know that how bad it hurts or something. I don't know.
But it's just like that, dude. Like, and they focus so much on their face, and I'm like, what is this? It's unnecessary. It just looks silly. Stop it. I don't like any of this. Ooh, there's an item on Steam that's on sale. Thanks for ruining the moment. But that's just the quick thing. Is like, I just thought that was unnecessary. Please, let's focus on this lady who's bringing new life into the destroyed world. Hoorah. Hopefully it doesn't have 3 arms. Because, you know, mutation radiation from the 50s.
It was too late for that. The kid was basically born. Like, the kid was done.
Yeah.
It was just still inside.
Just done.
It was done. You know, if a kid is a bun in the oven, this bun was done.
It's slightly burnt.
We're just keeping it warm.
No one turned the oven on.
No, they turned. Well, it's warm. You know, I just didn't open the door yet.
And then the other thing was this was the makeup that you were talking about with the radiation poisoning. Is we have the older daughter who was supposed to be married, and she goes stir crazy, and then escapes out of the basement, and then gets radiation poisoning. And then the guy who looks like the fiance, because you can't tell them apart.
Yeah.
He's like, here, let me go get her. It's the least I can do. They both get radiation sickness. He brings her back in. She's starting to deteriorate. Her younger brother is now blind. He's like, okay, well, now that the radiation levels have dropped, I'll take him to the hospital. Takes him to the hospital. We don't get any kind of closure with the kid's eyes. He's just stuck being
he's just
blind.
still blind. Well, it hasn't been that long.
Yeah, it hasn't been that long.
So,
it'd probably take a few months.
The doctor's like, yeah, maybe eventually.
Yeah. Because I know
as far as we know, he's still alive.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have poisoning or anything, so he should probably be fine.
Well, from what I understand, now I'm not an eye doctor, but eyes are the eyes are the fastest healing part of your body. And so I don't know how bad his retinas were burned.
I mean, he kind of looked right at it.
But I'm sure with him being as young as he is, it might take like a month or two, but I'm sure he'll get his sight back. I could be completely wrong, but I have that's my feeling, about 1 or 2 months. But then you have the daughter. And I do like the interaction because, you know, like the dude with the curly hair no longer has curly hair.
No, the moment where he takes his hat off is really great.
Yeah, and she's like, they gave me this ribbon to wear, but now I have no hair to wear it on. And then he takes his hat off, and then you can see he's like balding too, and he's like, I think you look great.
Yeah.
You know, like that right there is like a little, like a moment of happiness in a sea of despair. Because whenever he goes into the stadium, you know, like the basketball stadium, whatever it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And it's just nothing but just people.
Yeah. Which is real.
Yeah.
Like they used a ton of extras for that. And like that's all actual people packed into this basketball stadium.
And then like when you finally get to her, she's laying on the cot. Like we haven't seen any improvement in her status since she was brought. So we don't know if she's doing any better or not. Like we don't know. They haven't shown us anything with her. The only person we've gotten to see is the kid with the eyes, because there's interactions between him and, like, I guess the Japanese doctor or whatever, who pretends to be Italian for like some pizza joke to make
for the kid.
for the kid. So that happens, and I think that's one of the better moments in the movie. Is just having these people who have suffered having a good moment, if you would, even though it's not really good.
No, well, I mean, they're both going to die.
Everyone's going to die.
But I do like that also, that they get sort of this is not something we would normally be happy about, but because it's not as bad as everything else, it's something that we can at least smile for a moment, and we can be a little happy. We don't know what happens to the mom.
Oh, she's I don't know,
because they were there in the house, like her and the other kid
and the
were
daughter.
there in the house with the other guy with the shotgun outside in the yard, and then the dad gets shot, and then we never see them again, so we don't know what happened to them.
Well, that's something that kind of got me wondering as well, is they're out there with a fire, and I don't know what they're eating.
I don't know.
But the wife and the younger daughter are in the kitchen doing something. I can't tell you from what direction that house is facing, but it's a little surprising that no one noticed people outside building a fire.
Yeah.
Because they could have done it really quietly, because no one was talking. Like, who are y'all?
Yeah.
Nothing. Okay, this is a little odd.
Yeah, basically no one talks. That's not a main character, which is probably a budget thing. But it is weird. The guy
we don't want to have to pay you.
Cody isn't even in this like main part of the credits here, so I don't even know who he was. I was reminded a little bit with the Air Force guy of Will Smith in Independence Day.
Yeah,
where, like, he's off on the mission and then everybody else gets killed, and then he's sort of wandering around trying to get back to where somebody else has survived.
Well, even with that,
he just picks up a homeless guy instead of an alien. But
yeah,
I mean, homeless guy. Like, everybody's a homeless guy now. There's no homes, so, or mostly.
Well, home is where your heart is. Well, at this point, I don't think that's anywhere.
Who was the guy with the pistol, though, that was like, no, let the homeless guy drink?
Yeah, I
have no idea. Some just random guy was just like, nah, come on. Let's stop this foolery. And because we don't even see him, just like a hand with a pistol reaches into frame.
Yeah, and then like, he just pull the hammer back, and then we get it like from behind his leg, because he's got it like down. It's a really weird shot, but it illustrates what needs to be shown, so they can get some water. It
is weird. It's kind of odd that they didn't link it back into that it's not like Farmer Dad guy or something, just so that we used a character that we actually knew. Which the farmers are really not appreciative of the plans of the newly formed farming council either. Yeah. They're like, what do you mean remove how are we supposed to do that? It's like, well, do you have to... You either get to do that or you don't get to plant, and then we all die because we have no food.
Yeah.
So stop your complaining.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the whole, like, I can understand them wanting to know why. Because none of them know anything about radiation.
No, he says in the basement. I don't know.
So, like, explaining to them, like, hey, your top soil, roughly the top 4 inches or so, is done. It is useless. We will have to scrape it off and put it somewhere. And then, like, okay, why? Because the radiation has poisoned it. You can't plant in it. That I can understand. But saying how, you're a farmer, figure it out.
Yeah.
Like, this is ridiculous. Now, the whole, where are we going to put all of this soil? Because, he's got so much space.
Yeah, he says we got a lot, it's a lot of land.
Like, I'm sure someone can figure it out.
We can put it somewhere.
Yeah. Like, even if you have to not use the entirety of your land just to push it to an area where it's out of the way, now this part is usable. Like, even that, it's a temporary fix. You can get back to work. We will figure this out.
And you don't need as much farmland probably anyway, because you're not using it for as many things. You're not having to grow food for the cows, or you're just...
like food for human consumption only.
And so you can probably do with less space.
Now, granted, I don't know what animals are left but those horses. because
They're the only ones we see.
Because like all the chickens that we see are dead.
Chickens, the pigs,
all of the pigs are
dog.
dead. Like every animal other than like the 2 horses, like are dead.
There were a few other horses outside the church area where they had their horse tied up, but I don't know. But they're the only ones we see. Probably not any other animals, which the problem probably.
Well, because
roaches.
I'm not really
Make a point about the roaches.
Ugh, which is also not true.
I know it's not true. It was real dumb, but
well, I guess for the 80s it would be true.
Yeah, it's not. I'll excuse it. I won't hold it to the stop this 10% of your brain nonsense kind of thing that we know it's not true.
People in the 80s thought cockroaches were invincible to radiation.
Yeah,
so I'll let them have it.
They have very little soft tissue. It does take more and longer for them to be affected, but they still do. So. How do we feel about stars?
I'm gonna give it 3. I probably would have given it 4 if it wasn't for those 2 things.
Stupid thing.
But it's gonna get a 3.
It's tough because this is this like well-known thing. Although being the existence, we need to see the others. That we need to see the other 3, especially the English one, because that's the one that's considered to be the most traumatic and heavy.
What are they?
Hang on, let me find them here.
Granted, are they available on DVD, or are they going to be something we're going to have to hunt for?
I know at least one of them is the English one is for sure. I know one of them is called Threads. Threads, but that's not the main one. Although it's one that people still remember. Testament. It's called Testament. It takes place in San Francisco.
This sounds like the name of a bomb.
Well, I mean, maybe kind of, but it's I don't think it is. But so I guess maybe it's okay. I think. Well,
wait, what's the British one?
The British one is Threads is the British one.
Threads is the British one.
Threads is the British one. Testament is the super heavy one. Although they're both supposed to be super heavy. And then there's like one other one, I think, but it's not as important. I'll find it later.
Okay.
But
well, admittedly, like with all of these, this being the 80s, so the whole nuclear studies and science and mistruths about radiation. Like I love the whole like this is the late 40s, the 50s. Like
we don't know.
It causes giant monsters. Like I love that stuff. Like that's probably my favorite kind of series of movies, if you will. Like we're just radiation explains everything, aliens and stuff. I like that. And then we get to the point where we understand more about radiation,
and we know we're just gonna die.
And it's just like, no, it's not going to cause you to grow extra hands. No, it's not going to cause animals to mutate. It just kills things.
The atom is the basic building block of all matter.
And it will still kill you. Because rads.
Electronic spitballs.
Damn. Close, General, close. Only not electronic spitballs. Atomic spitballs.
I want a big like 20-ounce mug that just has atomic spitballs, and it's just like a paper wad, but it's like on fire, something like that, just flinging it across it.
Okay, I've been struggling with it. I think I'm gonna say 4.
Okay,
instead. Like it's right on the line, but I think it's effective enough, and it doesn't screw up very much, and that it does. I think what it wanted to do, which is kind of scare you about what would happen if like war broke out and show you that it's dumb and stuff. It's not perfect, but it does a pretty good job of it. Now the thing we're not going to talk much about this. We just have to address that it exists and discuss it briefly because it was part of the experience. You should, I think, go and watch it just because it's a neat sort of time capsule of the time, and also in the present time, refreshingly civil discussion of difficult and disagreeable issues on televised news kind of things.
And the wonderful thing is it is civil.
It is. It's very civil. And Ted Koppel, we're talking about the ViewPoint thing that aired immediately afterwards. You can get it on YouTube. It's easy to find. It's the whole reason we did the special report thing at the beginning here.
So good.
Ted Koppel is a very good news host.
Oh, he's so good.
I didn't like him some of the time when he was doing the Secretary of Defense or Secretary of State rather interview at the beginning, because he did do, it seemed to me, too much interrupting, and he would like try to make him give the answer he wanted him to give when it wasn't the answer he got, and I don't like that kind of thing.
Well,
but then he didn't do that ever again later. So,
well, I think I'm okay with it because the Secretary of State didn't actually answer any.
Well, that's
questions.
true. He didn't. But
you're just talking. Like, I asked a question and you just said random things that didn't actually pertain to the question. Come on.
Yeah, and I will say, if you try to watch it, that part is a bit dry and tedious. Once you get past that to the actual panel stuff, it gets good.
Oh, so good.
And you know,
the panel was better than the movie.
Well, it may have been. I mean, it's now the panel is real. So, and the movie is not. So
it's real.
That's at least something. It is. It's real. And it's basically everyone you would want to have on the panel from the time. And I mean, maybe not everyone. I guess you would have liked to have had Reagan on or something. Oh, which was the only other thing, the only other production thing is in the original television airing, the voice of the president during the broadcast was someone doing an imitation of Reagan. But that's the only time anyone ever heard that. In all of the subsequent rebroadcasts and on the video and Laserdisc and DVD editions, it's a different voice and of someone not trying to sound like Reagan. And which I thought, I didn't know that watching it. I didn't read that until after. But I didn't like the president voice. I thought it was really weak and fake sounding and artificial and weird. And I didn't like it. So I don't know.
What president is this?
I don't know what the Reagan one. I mean, I guess putting it out of time, then you can just sort of have it take place whenever you want, and it doesn't have to be during when Reagan was president, since he wasn't anymore after a time. But since he was at the time, it seems that was probably more of an impact, where it sounds like the president who you know is actually the president, so it anchors it in real life, just a bit more. And the thing they do in the panel, they do get ever so slightly less civil towards the end.
Yeah, because they were pressed for time.
Want to try? They're like, they're trying to interrupt each other or to talk just a little bit longer, but they mostly do. Which, I mean, when you have William F. Buckley on television, like I think one of the things that does make it really civil is that Ted Koppel steers the conversation around to the various people, and so he keeps it away from certain people for a period of time and then comes back to them, and so it's not like it is now where you watch a panel on CNN or Fox or whatever where everybody just interrupts each other and talks over each other, and there's no, like, maybe Wolf Blitzer is standing up there trying to keep things organized, but it's not really working. And it's just like everybody mostly waits to talk until they're told. There are a couple of times where someone says something out of turn. And that really, there's a really amazing moment where a guy in the audience who we saw ask a question earlier, they put the camera back over on the audience while one of the panelists is talking, and he is just like shaking his head and just, he does not agree at all.
No agreed.
It's so good. Also, it's a really good example of how to and how not to ask a question.
Yes.
Because there are some people who ask good questions and some people
who ask really terrible questions.
They
get called out for it.
They do get called out on it.
Don't repeat stuff we already know. Just ask your question.
And you see that so much when people ask questions, and I don't understand it. It's like, don't tell me what somebody else said. Don't tell me what they said in the panel. Don't use a bunch of quotes from someone else.
Yeah.
just ask a question.
Well, like, so I like Carl Sagan,
Yes.
but there were a few moments in this panel where it's just like, I'm going to answer your question with a quote. Like, no, I don't need a quote. I need science.
Give us a Carl Sagan quote.
I need facts, man. Like, you say something yourself. Don't rely on a quote for someone else.
He tried early on, and then they leaned on him for using too many numbers and statistics and facts and things, and so he just tried to ease it back and just sound meaningful.
Yeah.
And so he used some other people's meaningful things they already said to sound meaningful.
Well, when he was talking about it, and it's just like, yeah, like, if this was to happen, this movie is so wrong, it would be like 1,000 times worse.
Which I don't think 75% and 1,000 times are difficult numbers to understand. 1,000 missiles and below is okay probably, but somewhere above that's not complicated numbers.
No.
Like, I know statistics are inherently difficult for humans to understand because we didn't evolve to understand them. There's no statistics out on the African plains. We just aren't, like, it's very difficult for people to understand statistics without really thinking about them. And so people do just sort of glaze over. But there has to be a certain amount where you're like, we're going to trust you to not be totally stupid, and we're going to give you a little bit of facts and numbers here, and we expect you to be able to handle it. And so I didn't think he ever, which I don't think he did, but I think Ted Koppel was like, if I let him go, how many more numbers is he going to use? And at what point does it become a problem for the audience? So I'm just going to head this off. He's very good at heading things off.
Ooh, he is.
He heads off many things.
Well, he does it very cleanly. He does it very politely. He can, like, take it and, like, all right, because you've said this, I want to take that and lead it into this. And so, like, you don't really feel so much cheated.
No, because, and he's listening.
Yeah.
He's not...
He's paying attention.
He's paying attention. He's asking new questions and guiding things around, getting other people to talk if he thinks they have something relevant to say. And he doesn't just have a list of things that he's going to try to make everyone talk about, the way that he does seem to in the interview at the beginning.
I would say watching the movie is merely the cost to being able to watch this panel and understand what they're going on about because of the movie, because this was totally worth the watch.
It was
like totally worth it.
It was really
so good. Now, I think there was one thing that no one directly mentioned because I think it was the Secretary of Defense, the one who sat right beside Sagan, the center guy who was like very like, trust like the government, the military. Meh.
The guy that kind of looks like President Ford.
Yeah. And so, like, I'm going to say I agree with him in a sense because during that time, if you couldn't be a hippie, take a flower to the Russians and put it in there, they're just going to shoot you.
Oh yeah, the like responding to strength thing.
Yeah, and so it's like I can understand that you gotta like bulk up that chest and be like, listen here, Russia, we're not taking any of it, and it's just like, you're not doing anything. You just standing your ground. Like, I can understand that. I can support that because that's how it was.
Mm-hmm. Which if you needed some like hard example of that the Klingons are basically the Soviet Union, that right there is the same kind of thing. Like, think about the Klingons, think about like what we were told about their culture, and think about what he just said about Russia, and it's like that.
Yes.
So,
like the
much
strong
from the time.
Deserve respect.
Yeah.
And if you act weak to the Russians, they will not respect you. But no one bothered asking what would it take to get the Russians to the table, to convince them to reduce the arms because the Americans wanted to reduce arms. Like, they kind of danced around
No one ever
that.
said. I think there were some questions or people did comment on those kinds of things. What would it take? But because nobody really knows.
Well, yeah, it's like
give an answer.
They brought up that idea, but they didn't question how to do it. It's just like, we know we need to get the Russians to the table. Okay, but how do we get the Russians to the table? Like, that was a question that wasn't asked because they were always, it was so focused on what can America do to remove these missiles, but no one's like, well, Russia has to make that decision themselves. Well, they have to say, we agree, we will do what you are doing.
We're about 3 years, I think, from the tear down this wall speech that Reagan gave. I think that was 85 or 86. That might be wrong. I'm not looking it up. But we would eventually get there, at least into talking, but we still never really trusted each other. So, and it didn't matter because we just had to wait.
Well, it's like they were talking about, like, if we're alive in 10 to 15 years, like, that would be a good thing.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, yes, 10 to 15 years, things got a lot better. Like,
yeah,
I'm not really 100% sure, because, like, they kept bringing
8 years, and the wall was down. So,
well, like, they kept bringing up, like, what can people do? Like, what can the average Joe do? And I'm like, well, options are actually
nothing.
Yeah, like, it's kind of nothing. Just be like, hey,
vote maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's nothing you can do.
Be
It's
civil
all-
about it.
it's all
Talk
government
about it.
things.
You know, just things. Make sure people remember it. It's on the forefront of everyone's mind. You know, I'm not saying everybody
Don't
needs
hate
to.
the Russians, maybe.
Yeah, like, I think, you know, like I said, like, be civil about it. And it did happen. It did happen.
Basically. I mean,
Maybe
well,
not 100%, but we are much better now than I bet they even thought we would be then.
Oh, yes. I mean, there does seem to be a great deal of pessimism as to whether we'll make it through this or not. And, it turns out that we at least have so far. It was interesting listening to them talk about they didn't know that the Soviet Union was just going to collapse and we wouldn't have to do anything.
Yeah.
And so they had that sort of problem to deal with. They thought that was the problem. But they mentioned as a smaller issue that did bear on that we still have to have a lot of missiles, even if we agree with Russia, because what if
Other countries
Gaddafi gets one or something? And so that's much more the situation that we're in now. What if Iran gets one, or what if someone that doesn't even have a country gets one? And so that's in a way, we're already thinking ahead past the problem they were having in a fairly accurate way. I think they were still much more pessimistic about it because so what if one guy launches a nuclear weapon? It won't lead to nuclear winter because that requires a retaliatory exchange and a bunch of them going off in a short space of time. It would still kill a lot of people. It would be bad, but it's not going to kill us all.
Well,
And so the kill us all is dependent on it being large scale, big countries, lots of weapons.
Well, I think one of the things that they did bring up when they were talking about like the retaliating was the whole like fire without warning kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
Fire on warning.
fire on warning.
Yeah.
And
that whole exchange is so good where he's just like, but why, like, we should say it. Why won't we say it? Will we say it? Should we say it? What if we say it? And just McNamara arguing with, I guess, was it Kissinger that was on the other side of that? Or
that I don't remember anyone actually going against what he was saying.
I think he was sort of exchanging with Kissinger about it.
Yeah. But they talk about, like, if one was to be fired accidentally,
Yeah.
or if there was a miscommunication, like, if an accident happened. But at the same time, if one was to be fired and it wasn't from Russia, how would we know it's not from Russia? Like,
Yeah.
what do we have in place to guarantee that if one was to go off, we absolutely know where it's from to begin with?
Yeah, and that was the whole space discussion eventually that led
It's
to.
because it's not so much about, like, how can we prevent it with technology. It's how can we know?
How can we know?
Like, where? Because, like, if it did come from Russia, then it very much could be. It's like, well, what if they are attacking us? But if it came from somewhere that's not Russia, that happened to fly from a direction that might cause that confusion, then how are we to know that, like, oh yeah, Iran had this, we didn't know about it, they launched it at us, it came from over Russia, it could have been Russia. Like, how can we know so we can make the appropriate decision and then completely invade that country and remove everything that they ever known?
Yeah, because
because America.
the only thing that we could really tell with the early warning systems was that something was coming once it got close enough.
Yeah.
Something had launched. Now we did have the ones, up in Alaska and along Canada, and the ones that faced directly that way. We did also have other stuff over in Europe so that it was closer, so that we could, seismically detect a launch, so that we knew something had been launched, so that before it was picked up on the early warning system, we could already be in the decision-making process. Because it was a very short space of time. It was somewhere between like 18 and about 30 minutes, depending on where it was launched from and where it was going to impact, that something had to happen before that you had to make a decision or decide not to make a decision until after something actually hit. It was a very short space of time. The reason why the Cuban Missile Crisis was so dangerous was because it was so close. It was like 2 or 3 minutes, and it's already here. And so there's almost no time. Like, there's no time to target anything to it to shoot it down. There's no time to do anything. And it's almost not even time to get the president into the bunker before it's there. So once everything is on the other side of the earth, then we have a little more time to do detecting of things and deciding things. They were right, though, that the whole space idea was not at all feasible at the time.
Yeah.
And really still kind of isn't, because it's not.
Well, from my understanding, like, it's not so much a defense as much as it is like a communication. It's like we can
detecting.
You launch it, we can look right at it, like we can see it. we know its exact point in time. We know how fast it's going. We know how high up. We know everything about it.
We probably can't do anything.
And like we have like these things that are kind of like lasers that we're trying to test out now.
Yeah, it's probably not going to work for a long time. Yes, I know there's that one on the top of that Navy ship that they shot at a thing, but yeah.
And then I'm just thinking, but then there's that railgun from Transformers 2.
Well,
okay.
The other really amazing moment was when they asked.
Y'all can tell we really like this segment.
They asked a question, and McNamara gave this just amazingly, like, politically safe, I can't say anything about this because I know classified things,
yes,
but I'm only letting that on through my smile. And it was so perfect.
The pure definition of covering one's rear.
It's
so much wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Oh my God.
And like, I don't really agree with McNamara about anything anymore, but I don't agree with almost anyone about anything anymore. And I only agree with about half of what he said back then, but he's at least much more reasonable and agreeable seeming at the time. And then they had the one guy where he didn't have anything but just philosophy and like therapy for people.
One second. Is there the guy who talked really slow and was like, are you talking about him? Like, 30 years ago, I wrote a book about this. Or are we talking about... No.
About
the guy that's
Henry Kissinger.
Okay, and then there was the guy who's... Okay, the Jewish
Holocaust
gentleman,
guy, yeah.
Yes. Now, the only direct issue I have with him, because he admits that there's stuff he does not know.
He does.
And I will say, I will stand by you with this because you're understanding your limitations and you will not give false answers on purpose. But I understand, hey, it's the 80s. This guy lived through the Holocaust. It's bad. But every time he would refer to... Because, like, nuclear war affects everyone. Radiation does not judge. It's not going to go, hey, because you're so-and-so, we won't affect you. Yeah. And so he kept referring to, like, this is going to be the Jews' problem. Like, the Jews are going to have to deal with this. I'm like, guy, I can understand where you're coming from, but we have to understand
it's not exactly the same.
This isn't like one country, people being pulled. This is the world dying quickly.
Yeah.
All at once. Everywhere.
You might die sucking in soot.
Yeah. Radioactive soot.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, I kind of wanted him to step away from like
he eventually did.
Yeah. Like it took him forever. But towards the end of it, he did kind of, I guess you'd say, mellow out. I guess maybe that pessimism Sagan dropped on everybody.
Yeah,
because like,
which
oh
is
my
the thing,
god,
like they start with him, and he just drops the pessimism. That's exactly what happened. He just comes right out with the depression, as if.
Well, we're gonna take
needed
a ray of sunshine from this super sad moment to understand that thank goodness this hasn't happened.
Yeah. Oh, the other just sort of production thing is that once the bombs go off, there's a fade there. That was the last commercial. There were never, once the end of the world has happened, they never broke it again. It was one continuous thing. So there were no commercials, and then there was a commercial between that and ViewPoint, like a really short break, and then they come into ViewPoint, and then it's not until like halfway through it where he's like, we're coming up on a break, that then there were commercials again.
Yeah.
And then there weren't again until the end of it. So
yeah,
I really appreciate the event nature of this that ABC took with it, and just didn't screw it up by having it be on TV. They really gave it everything that they had.
Well, even because when we were watching like the last segment, and he's like, we're going to go to a commercial break, and then he has to cut one guy off, and he's like, hold on that thought, and then commercial break, and then like we don't get a cut.
No, we get
to see the whole thing. It's not like they're going to pause for the commercial break and they're going to play. Like, no, it's like, here's the pause for the edit and then keep talking.
And then well, it wasn't for the edit because it was straight live. That part was live, like directly out. So it's edited in such a way in the version that we have now because they just cut the commercials out perfectly. But they just like sat there and did nothing, and then he points to the next person. So it wasn't an edit. It was
whoever did re-edit it for this did a really good job.
It is. They've never done it. I don't understand why, because I think it's very much a part of the experience. But they didn't ever put this. This should be on the DVD with the movie.
It should.
It should be there, and they do that. They have done that with other things, where they have put news specials or certain things from the outside. With on the DVD with the movie, if it was something that was important to having the whole package. And I don't understand why they haven't, because ABC still owns the movie and ABC News still exists. I don't know why they don't just put it there, because you should see it, but at least it's easily available. It's not this like thing we have to read about that, oh, there was this news special afterwards, but we never get to see because it was only aired once live and it was early enough in time that no one has it. I mean, the only reason we have it is because someone beta taped it when it was actually on, which is the version that exists commonly on the internet.
Now I do have one question. The time that this took place, like the whole, we're making the movie, we're playing it on TV, this event's going to happen.
Yeah.
Was there a reason for the date?
Not really, no. It was actually pushed a little bit because it was supposed to air a little earlier, but then they had so much difficulty in getting it edited to Nicholas Meyer and the network and the censors and everybody, where they could kind of agree that it was a reasonable version. Because originally it was going to be over 2 nights. It was going to be a 4-hour event, and then they couldn't get enough advertising for it because of the material of it being difficult for advertisers to want to advertise during. And so then they had to go back and cut it down again, and then they kept fighting over just tiny moments of extra violence or anything. And so it aired a little later than it was going to be, but there's not any significance to November 20th, no.
All right, because now I know there shouldn't be any connection, but I almost feel like it's a coincidence because Fallout 76 came out 6 days ago from the air of this, 7 days ago today. And I just think it's kind of weird because it's like they have this event, and that's like this deals with nuclear power and stuff, and then it's like a week, and then we have this, and this is historically important.
I have no idea. I don't know.
And so I wasn't sure if there's just anything like date-wise within this month that's like, hey, nuclear awareness. Nuclear.
I don't think so. I don't think it's when the first when the bomb was invented or anything. I'm not. I didn't think about that at all. I didn't look at. I'll look around and on a future episode if I find anything, we'll discuss it again. Now the last thing, just to set the history of this, they did show that President Reagan was shown the film a few days before it was actually on television, and he wrote in his diary that it was very effective and left him greatly depressed, which I guess was kind of the point. And then, so it did have some effect on him. There's another story from later that after the intermediate range nuclear forces treaty was signed, that Nicholas Meyer received a telegram from Reagan telling him that the movie had some impact on his thinking and in the negotiations. Relatively recently, Meyer has said that wasn't true, and that was a mistelling of a story from a letter that he had received from the White House at a different time or something, and it didn't. So that part isn't true, but we do know that at least it did have some impact on Reagan when he watched it originally. As the next year after this, Rocky IV famously had a great impact on him, and many other people as well, on the attitude between us and the Soviets, or America and the Soviets. I know I've said us a bunch of times. I don't really like phrasing it that way.
But it is us.
Well, but
US.
it's not us and them anymore though, because there's no them, so it can't be us.
That's right. There is no more Soviet Union.
It's not the same us and them. And no, I don't mean the Pink Floyd song either. So. So this has been the We Watch Movies Best Report of the day after the day after. And I was going to do it at the beginning, but I'll do it here. To paraphrase Ted Koppel slightly, and I guess it applies now in the present time as well. In case you're in need of some good news, it's all still there, and it's still there now, 35 years later. So things will be okay. Don't be too depressed. Go watch a happy movie now. This was not a happy movie. I don't think the next movie is going to be just like a boom cannon of a happy thing, but it's going to be happier than this. We'll do something happy pretty soon too. So if you only watch a movie when we talk about it on the show, happiness is coming. That's all we have to say about the day after. We'll see you next time.
Later.